The text on my phone said family emergency, and I almost dropped my coffee. It was my brother. He never texted me first. Not once in 3 years had Derek initiated a conversation unless he needed something. A favor. A cosign on a lie to our parents. Someone to cover for him when he skipped Mom's birthday dinner. So when his name lit up my screen at 7 in the morning on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, my stomach dropped before I even read the words. Grandma Dot had a fall. She's okay, but shaken up. Mom and Dad want everyone home this weekend. I stared at the message for a long time, standing in the kitchen of my apartment in Cincinnati, still in the oversized t-shirt I'd slept in. I'd been planning to drive down to Knoxville anyway. I'd already requested the days off from work, already bought a pie from the bakery down the street because Grandma Dot always said my cooking tasted like I'd learned it from a YouTube video with the sound off. I called my mom. Is she okay? What happened? She slipped getting out of the bath, Mom said. Her voice had that particular tone, the one that meant she was already moving on to logistics. She's fine, Lydia. Bruised hip, nothing broken. The doctor says she just needs to rest. Okay, I'll still come down Thursday morning like I planned. There was a pause, a specific kind of pause I'd learned to dread over the years, the kind that meant something was coming that I wasn't going to like. Actually, honey, that's what we wanted to talk to you about. Your father and I, and Derek and Kayla. We've been talking and we think this might actually be a good time for us to do that cruise, the one we had to cancel last March. I didn't say anything. It's a 5-day Caribbean cruise leaving out of Miami Friday morning. It was already paid for, and the rebooking window is closing. Grandma needs someone with her through the weekend, just until her homemaid, Patricia, gets back from her daughter's wedding in Phoenix. Patricia will be back Sunday evening. So you want me to stay with Grandma Dot, I said slowly, while all of you go on a cruise. It's only 4 nights, Lydia. You're good with her. She likes you. She likes all of us, Mom. You know what I mean. I did know what she meant. I'd always been the one Grandma Dot called when she needed something fixed. Not the handyman kind of fixed, but the other kind. When Grandpa Ray passed 6 years ago, I was the one who slept on her couch for 2 weeks. When she had her knee surgery 3 years ago, I took 5 days off and drove down without being asked. Derek sent flowers. My parents called every other day from their house 40 minutes away and called that close enough. Does Grandma know about the cruise? I asked. Another pause. Shorter this time. We mentioned it to her. She said it was fine. I almost laughed. Grandma Dot would walk barefoot over gravel before she'd admit she needed something. She'd say she was fine while bleeding from an open wound. Of course she said it was fine. Let me call her, I said. Lydia, I'll call you back. I hung up and dialed Grandma Dot's number. She picked up on the second ring, which told me she'd been expecting the call. Hey, sweet pea. Hey, Grandma. How's your hip? Hurts like the dickens, but I've had worse. How are you? You still bringing that pie? I'm still coming, I said. I heard about the cruise. A pause on her end now. Then a quiet, tired exhale. Your mom asked you? She did. You don't have to come. I told them I was fine on my own. I know you told them that. Patricia will be back Sunday. I know. There was a moment of silence between us, the kind that doesn't need to be filled. Then she said, soft and a little smaller than usual, it would be nice to have the company. That was enough. That was more than enough. Grandma Dot asking for company was the equivalent of anyone else getting down on their knees and begging. I called my mom back and told her I'd be there Thursday by noon. She said, wonderful, like I'd just agreed to something completely reasonable, like I'd been offered a gift and graciously accepted it. Derek texted me a thumbs up. Kayla, his wife, texted a little string of hearts. Then they all went quiet, probably already looking up what to pack for Miami. I finished my coffee, cold by then. I went to work. I told my coworker Jessie what was happening, and she looked at me the way people look at you when they're deciding whether to say something honest or something kind. She went with kind. That's sweet of you, she said. I appreciated the effort. I got to Grandma Dot's house in Knoxville just before noon on Thursday. It's a house I've known my whole life. A cream-colored colonial on a quiet street in the older part of town, with a porch swing that creaks in a specific key and a rose garden along the left side of the driveway that Grandma has kept alive for 30 years. She was sitting in the porch swing when I pulled up, wrapped in a cardigan, her silver hair pinned back the way she always wore it. She looked smaller than the last time I'd seen her. That's the thing about getting older that no one warns you about when you're young. It happens in increments, in the space between visits, until one day you drive up and the person you love looks like they've quietly lost some essential weight, not in their body, but in their presence, like the world has been slowly turning down their volume without asking. I carried my bag and the bakery pie up the porch steps, and she patted the cushion next to her. "Sit with me a minute before we go in," she said. "It's a nice afternoon." It was a nice afternoon. 58 degrees, the sky the pale blue of a worn-out denim jacket, the kind of Tennessee November that feels like an apology for what December's about to do. "How's the hip?" I asked. "Manageable? I've been using the grabber thing for the high shelves like Patricia's always nagging me to." "Good. Your father called this morning to tell me they landed in Miami safe." "Good," I said again. She looked at me sideways. "You're not mad." "I'm not mad. You've got that voice." "I don't have a voice, Grandma." She made a sound that was not quite a laugh. "Baby girl, you have had a voice since you were 4 years old. I once watched you tell your kindergarten teacher that you were frustrated, not angry, and that she should please acknowledge the difference. You were wearing light-up sneakers. I did laugh at that. I couldn't help it. She always could do that. Find the exact story that punctured whatever tension I was carrying, and let the air out gently, without damage. We sat there for a while. She told me about her neighbor's new dog, a golden retriever named Biscuit, who had apparently eaten an entire bag of mulch and survived with only dignity lost. I told her about a project at work that had gone sideways for 3 weeks, and then righted itself overnight like nothing had happened. We talked the way people talk when they have time and nowhere to be. Slowly, in circles, following whatever thread felt interesting. Eventually we went inside. The house smelled like cedar and something faintly floral, the same smell it had always had. Grandma's collections lined the shelves in the front hallway, teapots, small framed photos, a few ceramic birds she'd bought at craft fairs over the decades. I knew every piece. I could have drawn the layout of this house from memory in the dark. I made us lunch tomato soup from a can, grilled cheese on sourdough, the way she liked it. And we ate at the kitchen table with the little radio on the counter playing the oldies station she kept it on. She told me about a book she'd been reading, a mystery set in coastal Maine. She was at the part where the detective had just discovered the body in the lighthouse, and she had 3 suspects lined up in her head. "Who do you think did it?" I asked. "The nephew," she said without hesitation. "It's always the nephew." After lunch she napped, and I cleaned up the kitchen, wiped down the counters, swept the floor. There were a few dishes in the back of the cabinet that needed hand-washing. I did those too. It wasn't a chore. It felt, actually, like the most useful I had felt in a while. Thursday evening after dinner, we sat in the living room. She had a jigsaw puzzle set up on the card table, one of those 1,000-piece landscapes, a Vermont-covered bridge in autumn. She worked on it methodically, starting from the edges the way she always had, and I helped find pieces and handed them over when I spotted a match. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "You can always ask me something. Do you get lonely, living here by yourself?" She was quiet for a moment, turning a puzzle piece in her fingers. "Sometimes," she said, "less than you'd think, more than I let on. Grandma." "What? I'm old. I'm not helpless." She set the piece down in its place. "Your grandfather used to say I was the most self-sufficient woman he'd ever met. Said it like a compliment most of the time. Only most of the time. Occasionally it frustrated him." She smiled, and there was a whole life in that smile. "Decades of a partnership I'd only ever seen from the outside. Used to say, Dot, let somebody help you once in a while. I wasn't very good at it. You're better at it now. Older and wiser." She found another piece. "Patricia is good to me, and the neighbors check in. It's not so bad." She paused. "It's the evenings that get long sometimes. After dinner, that's when your grandfather and I used to talk. About nothing particular. Just talk. I didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say that wouldn't come out smaller than what I felt. We worked on the puzzle for another hour. She told me about Grandpa Ray building this house's deck himself over the course of 2 summers in the late 80s, how he'd never built anything in his life before that, but had read every book he could find and just started. He was like that, she said. If he decided something was worth doing, he figured it out. What did he do before he retired? I said. I knew the broad strokes, manufacturing, his own business, but I'd never asked for the details. I'd always assumed there would be more time for those conversations. She looked up from the puzzle. You really want to know? I really want to know. So she told me. Grandpa Ray had started a small industrial parts company in 1979, right after he and Grandma got married. He'd worked for a larger manufacturer for 8 years and learned everything he could, then broke off with 2 colleagues and started his own shop out of a leased space in Chattanooga. It had been difficult for a long time. She described years of tight budgets, of her working 2 jobs, of them calculating grocery lists down to the dollar. But the company grew. Slowly, then steadily. By the mid-90s, it had over 60 employees and contracts with several regional manufacturers. In 2004, a national company made them an offer. Grandpa Ray spent 6 months deliberating, drove Grandma half crazy, talking it through from every angle, and finally sold. The sale price was $4.2 million. I did the math quietly in my head. He'd been in his early 50s. He had 30 years. What did he do with it? I asked. I paid off the house, set up college funds for your father and your uncle when they were already adults, which your grandfather found hilarious. They're grown men, Ray, I told him, but he wanted to do it anyway. We gave a good amount to our church and to a children's hospital in Chattanooga he felt strongly about. She picked up another puzzle piece. The rest he invested. He was careful about it, worked with a financial advisor he trusted, diversified the way you're supposed to. He wasn't trying to get richer, just trying to make sure the money lasted. Did it? She set the piece down. Met my eyes. When he passed, she said quietly, I had his accounts transferred to my name. I've barely touched the principal. Between Social Security and the account interest, I live comfortably, more than comfortably. She paused. The accounts are at approximately $11 million now. I stared at her. She looked back at me steadily, without apology or drama. Just a fact offered plainly. Grandma, I said, does my dad know? Your father knows there was a business sale. He knows we've been comfortable. He's never asked beyond that. She looked back at the puzzle. Your grandfather didn't believe in advertising what you had. Neither do I. I didn't know what to say. I thought about my dad's house. Nice, solidly middle class, nothing flashy. I thought about the cruise they'd left for this morning, the one they'd been refunding and rebooking for a year like it was a major financial event. I thought about the way my mother had described Grandma's home aid, like it was a burden she was managing. Why are you telling me? I asked. Grandma Dot was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, because you're here. We didn't talk about the money again that night. We finished the puzzle's edge pieces, watched the tail end of a quiz show she liked, and went to bed at a reasonable hour. But I lay awake in the guest room, the same room I'd slept in since I was a child, with the same patchwork quilt and the same faint smell of cedar. And I turned what she'd said over and over. Because you're here. Not because I was her favorite. Not because I was her favorite. Not because I deserved something. Just because I had shown up. In the morning I made biscuits from scratch, which took 2 tries because the first batch came out like small, sad rocks, a fact Grandma found genuinely delightful. We ate the second batch with butter and honey at the kitchen table, and she told me about Thanksgiving when my dad and his brother were teenagers, some story involving a turkey, a fire extinguisher, and a neighbor's cat that should have been filmed for television. Her laughter was the best sound in the world. I'd always thought that even as a kid. Big and unpretentious and completely uninterested in being elegant. We spent Friday the way I imagine retired people spend days when there's nowhere to be, and no schedule to keep. Slowly, pleasantly. We walked around the block once, her leaning lightly on my arm, pointing out which neighbors had added a new car or taken down a tree. We drove to a garden center she liked, that was already selling poinsettias and small Christmas wreaths. She bought a wreath for the front door and a poinsettia for the kitchen windowsill. I carried both. Saturday morning, she asked if I'd help her with the storage closet off the guest room. It had been packed too tight to access comfortably, and she'd been meaning to reorganize it for months. We worked through it together for a couple of hours, pulling out boxes, inventorying what was in them, consolidating where we could. Near the back, stacked behind folded curtains, were 3 archival boxes labeled in Grandpa Ray's handwriting. "Leave those," she said quietly. "I know what's in them. I left them." At the bottom of one shelf was a shoebox that turned out to contain old photographs, loose ones, not in albums. Grandma sat down in the guest room chair and went through them while I finished the closet. Every so often she'd say something. "Oh, that's the summer we drove to Yellowstone," or "Lord, look at my hair," and I'd come look over her shoulder at whatever image she was holding. There was one of her and Grandpa Ray standing in front of what must have been the original business space. A concrete building, a hand-painted sign. They looked young. They looked tired. They were smiling like they'd just won something. "You were brave," I said. She looked at the photo for a moment. "We were scared," she said. "That's not the same thing as brave. Brave is when you're scared and you do it anyway." She set the photo down. "Your grandfather was brave. I mostly just refused to quit." Saturday evening after dinner, she asked me to help her with something in her bedroom. I followed her in, a room I'd rarely entered, it always feeling like private space, and she opened the drawer of her nightstand and took out a sealed envelope. "I had my attorney update my will last spring," she said. "I want you to know what's in it, not because I'm going anywhere soon, but because I think you should know. Grandma, you don't have to. I want to." She sat on the edge of the bed. "I've left specific amounts to your uncle's family. I've left specific amounts to your parents. The amounts are fair, and I arrived at them deliberately." She looked at me directly. "The rest, the majority of the estate, including the accounts, the house, and Grandpa's archive, goes to you." I sat down on the bench at the foot of her bed because my legs made that decision for me. "I don't," I started. "You're not getting it because you came this weekend. I want to be clear about that. I'd been thinking about this for a long time." She held the envelope in both hands. "You're getting it because over the past 6 years, every time I needed someone, you were the person who showed up, not because anyone asked you to, not because you expected something in return, just because that's who you are." She paused. "Your grandfather was the same way. It's not a small thing to be that kind of person." I didn't cry. I was surprised I didn't cry. I think I was too stunned for it, the emotion too large and too complicated to resolve itself into something as simple as tears. "I don't know what to say," I told her. "You don't have to say anything." She set the envelope on the nightstand. "I just wanted you to know. It felt dishonest not to tell you." I sat with her in the quiet bedroom for a long time. The house settled around us with its old, familiar sounds. From the kitchen, I could still faintly hear the radio she'd left on. Patricia came back Sunday evening, just as she'd said she would. She was a compact, efficient woman in her 60s who moved through Grandma's house with the ease of someone who knew exactly where everything was kept. She thanked me for staying. I thanked her for coming back. I said goodbye to Grandma on the front porch, the same porch where we'd sat 4 days earlier. She held my face in both hands for a moment, the way she'd done since I was a child. Just held it, looked at me. "Drive safe," she said. "Text me when you get home. I will. And Lydia." She released my face. "Don't carry around resentment about this weekend. About your parents. They are who they are. That's not your problem to solve." I nodded. I wasn't sure I could promise that, but I appreciated that she said it. I drove back to Cincinnati. I stopped once for gas and a bad cup of coffee somewhere in the middle of Kentucky. I thought about a lot of things on that drive. About Grandpa Ray building something from nothing. About Grandma Dot standing beside him and refusing to quit. About the shoebox of photographs and the hand-painted sign and 30 years of patience. I got home a little after 9. I texted Grandma that I was safe. She replied with a single heart emoji, which was the most technology she voluntarily deployed. My mom called the next morning. They'd gotten back from the cruise. She sounded tanned and rested and in good spirits. "How was Grandma?" she asked. "Good," I said. "We had a really nice time." "Good. That's so good." She didn't ask for details. She moved on to the cruise, the ports they'd stopped at, the restaurants, a sunset that Kayla had photographed beautifully. I listened. I said the right things at the right times. When we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table for a while. I thought about what Grandma had said. Don't carry around resentment. They are who they are. I thought about what I'd learned. Not about the money. The money was almost secondary, something I still hadn't fully absorbed. But about Grandpa Ray and those hard early years and the kind of life that gets built one careful decision at a time. And what it means to stick around for someone when staying is inconvenient and no one's watching. You can't manufacture that in yourself. You either show up or you don't. And over time, the showing up accumulates into something, into a record, into a relationship, into trust that's been earned so slowly and steadily that neither person thinks of it as a transaction. That's the thing about my family that I'd spent years being baffled and hurt by. They'd look at what I did, the driving down, the staying, the long evenings on puzzles and the biscuit disasters, and they'd see obligation, or they'd see Lydia being Lydia, reliable, predictable, available. And maybe they weren't wrong, exactly, but they'd missed the part where doing those things changed me, where those hours with her gave me something back that I couldn't have gotten anywhere else. I don't know if my parents will ever understand what happened. I don't know if there's a version of that conversation I could have with my mother or with Derek that would land without turning into something ugly. Maybe someday. Maybe not. What I know is this: I drove to Knoxville for Thanksgiving, and I came home different, not because of an inheritance. Though I still go quiet when I think about that, still feel the weight of it like something I'm not sure I know how to carry yet. But because I sat on a porch swing with my grandmother and listened to her really talk, because I learned who my grandfather was in a way I should have asked about years ago and didn't, and now I'm grateful I finally did before it was too late. Because she held my face in her hands on a November evening, and I understood in that moment that being known by someone, really known over years and years, is the most valuable thing in the world. And you can't put a number on it. You can't divide it in a will. You can only earn it, one quiet evening at a time. I've thought a lot about that Thanksgiving weekend since it happened. Not obsessively, not in the way that keeps you up at night grinding your teeth. More like the way you return to a photograph you found in a drawer, turning it over in your hands, noticing something new in it each time. What I keep coming back to is something simple. Not the money, not the will, not the look I'll eventually see on my mother's face when the attorney reads the details aloud. What I keep coming back to is Grandma Dot sitting across from me at the kitchen table while the oldies station played, telling me about a fire extinguisher and a neighbor's cat, laughing that big, unpretentious laugh of hers, and me laughing too, and neither of us needing anything more from that moment than exactly what it was. I didn't go to Knoxville to earn something. I want to be clear about that to myself, because it matters. I went because she said it would be nice to have the company, and that was enough of a reason. That's always been enough of a reason. But here's what I've come to understand. The choices we make when nothing is guaranteed, when no one is watching, when there's no obvious reward on the other side, those choices are the ones that actually shape who we are, not the grand gestures, the showing up, the staying, the 2 failed batches of biscuits and the puzzle pieces handed across a card table on a Thursday night. My parents and Derek made their choice that weekend too. They made it the same way they'd been making it for years, incrementally, casually, without ever stopping to think of it as a choice at all. They assumed someone else would handle it. They assumed I would handle it. And they weren't wrong. But in not being wrong, they revealed something about themselves that had always been true, just never quite so visible. I don't think they're bad people. I've had to work hard at that conclusion, and I'm still not done working. But I think there's a kind of moral laziness that masquerades as trust, as confidence, as Lydia's got it, and over time, that laziness accumulates into a pattern, and the pattern becomes a life. You don't notice what you've become until something holds up a mirror. Grandma Dot held up a mirror, not to punish anyone, not to make a point. She just made a decision, over years of quiet observation, about what kind of character deserved to be trusted with what she and Grandpa Ray had spent a lifetime building. And character, I've come to believe, is simply the sum of what you do when it costs you something, when it's inconvenient, when there's no applause. Grandpa Ray built a business from nothing because he decided it was worth doing and then figured it out. Grandma Dot stood beside him through years of tight budgets and refused to quit. That's the real inheritance they built. Not the $11 million, but the proof that patience and integrity, practiced over decades, actually compound into something, into a life that holds. I'm still figuring out what that means for me. I'm still learning how to carry what she's left me, not just the practical weight of it, but the responsibility implied by the trust. I think I'll be figuring that out for a long time, but I know this. The long drive down to Knoxville, the bad cup of coffee somewhere in Kentucky, the porch swing and the puzzle and the 2 ruined batches of biscuits, none of it was wasted. It was never wasted. It was the whole point.